Curator. My name is Sofia and I'm a curator in training from Portugal, the little country in the tail of Europe next to Spain. I'm doing a master's degree in curatorial studies, and one of my goals for this year was to visit 50 exhibitions. Now, at the time, I didn't know how many exhibitions I actually visited a year, so I didn't know that that's not a lot of exhibitions for a curatorial student, so I will probably end up visiting a lot more. I thought, since I will be doing this, why not share my experiences with other people? So that's how the idea for this show was born. You may have noticed my funny accent. This is because English isn't my mother tongue. I'm Portuguese, so English is my second language. I do write a lot and read a lot in English, but I don't have that many opportunities to practice speaking it. Hopefully, as the series progresses, I'll get a little bit better. Why did I decide to do this as a web series? Thing is, it's not always easy to know what's going on in the art world in the more peripheral countries. It's easy to keep up with New York and London and Berlin and Paris and Beijing, but sometimes I wonder what's going on in the smaller countries outside the more well-known artistic cities. So this is for all of you who happen to be curious about what's happening exhibition-wise in my little country of Portugal. This is also why I'm doing this in English and not in Portuguese. Whether we like it or not, English is the lingua franca nowadays, so it's the best way to make sure more people understand what I'm saying. So my goal is to document exhibitions in Porto and the rest of the cities in Portugal that I happen to be visiting, and offer some kind of commentary or criticism, if you like. Mostly I go to small exhibitions in more alternative places, but hopefully I will also be able to show you some of the blockbuster exhibitions in the bigger museums. Sometimes I do travel around Europe, so maybe you will get to see a bit of what's going on in Paris or London or some other city that's cheap to fly to. To start off, I will show you an exhibition in a comic book shop. My favorite comic book shop in Porto, and one of the only ones actually, but it's the best one. It's called Mundo, Fantasma, or Ghost World in English, and the exhibition is called Violeta e Outras Histórias. Fernando Relvas is a Portuguese illustrator who has been publishing comics for the last 40 years. You may not know this, but Portugal was under a dictatorship for most of the 20th century, up until 1974. This means that most of what was going on outside the country wasn't allowed to enter without passing through some sort of censorship. And it also meant that it took us a lot longer to start experimenting with more alternative art forms, such as comic books. Still, we had a few artists who were able to publish a few gems. And Fernando Relvas belongs to the generation whose artworks began taking off roughly at the same time as the Portuguese Revolution. This particular exhibition is dedicated to two graphic stories by Fernando Relvas, Sangue Violeta, or Violet Blood in English, and L123, both of which have been published as books. The exhibitions in this place are usually very straightforward, so there isn't much to say about the curatorial side of it. But there's no denying the historical and aesthetic interest of these small events. Despite their growing popularity, comic books in Portugal are still not part of the mainstream culture. And even those few who are actively interested in comic books don't really know much about the history of publications and authors in our country, so it's important to keep up with these exhibitions. The next couple of exhibitions that I'm going to talk about opened at the same day on the same place, the Portuguese Centre for Photography. Full disclosure, I worked there as an intern for a few months last year. The Portuguese Centre for Photography is housed in a former prison in the heart of Porto, which has been refurbished to work as a cultural institution / museum / documentation center. Admission is free and there's a lot to see in the building. If you go there, check out the permanent exhibition on the top floor that's dedicated to photographic equipment. I worked closely with that collection when I was there, and it's pretty amazing if photography is your thing. The first exhibition that I'm going to talk about is about Ryszard Kapuscinski. I really have no idea how to say his name, I'm so sorry. A Polish journalist who established himself as a literary author and poet in Reportagem. As a Polish correspondent, he was witness to several revolutions and other important political events in Africa and South America and Europe. I went to the exhibition opening and saw a talk about the work and life of this journalist, as well as the reading of some of his poems. I have to say that historically his works seem very important, but the way they were presented at this exhibition was not the best one in my opinion. Because his texts are so important, the exhibition makers decided to give them the same focus as they gave to the images. Something that's very hard to make really work in a traditional exhibition space, I think. So as you can see in the video, what happens is that neither the photographs nor the texts get the focus that they deserve. Instead, their impact is reduced and the result isn't very appealing. I think it's a perfect example of an exhibition that would have worked a lot better in a book format. 12.12.12 is a project by a group of Portuguese photojournalists and writers who, since the beginning of the economic crisis, have traveled the country documenting the effect of the crisis in the lives of the common people. There's the silent voices in the debate, but they're the ones who feel the effects of austerity more directly. These images and the texts they inspired were published in a book. But unlike the Ryszard Kapuscinski exhibition, this exhibition focused on the photographs. And it's all the better for it because there are truly remarkable images. Obviously, the current economic crisis is global, but there are some countries who feel it more than others. And in Europe, Portugal and Greece are widely considered the countries that were hit worst by the recession. For many people in my country, the situation is desperate, but for some, it has always been desperate and it's only getting worse. The photos show houses, shops, ruins, and abandoned landscapes reminiscent of the lost promises of capitalism. But above all, they show people on the fringe, abandoned by a society that deemed their lives useless, devoid of economic value and therefore of any value. This is a subject that's very close to me because even though these situations are inescapable here, everyone is going or knows someone who is going through a very rough spot right now. You don't really see these people and their stories in the mainstream media. Whenever the crisis is discussed on TV or newspapers, you mostly see politicians debating or more often insulting each other or demonizing the unemployed. And then you see the protests on the streets. There are a few projects that are looking into the practical effects of austerity on people's lives, but they don't get as much attention as mainstream drama, which is why I chose to highlight this exhibition. And also because the photos aren't gratuitous or judgmental, which is always a danger when it comes to photojournalism. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you find this series interesting. This was only the first episode. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments or talk to me on Twitter or Facebook. And if you know of other web shows that are about art or exhibitions, please send them my way. I would love to see them. Okay, thank you for watching. See you next time with more exhibitions.